Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. Insert folksy anecdote here.
That was a good one.
Thank you. Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. My name is Jake. I'm a former evangelical turned queer sex therapist. And today, as in any good day, I'm scintillated to be joined by the sensational, scrumptious sage whose self-assured and sincere sense of self seems somehow secondary to her skillful, secure smarts and saintly sympathy. Synonyms! Brooke, how are you?
I'm so good. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
You said saintly, but I heard it as Satanly. I mean, I guess both apply, really.
If that's what you heard, maybe it needed to be said. Brooke, happy Pride.
Thank you so much.
It is our time of year.
It is.
We did it.
Did we?
Readers, we're not at 100 today. And
nope.
So
We are both sick.
We're doing great.
We're doing the best that we can.
It's
readers.
Pride.
It's Pride. We're celebrating. We do not have ear infections and coughs and upper respiratory infections. No, we don't.
We're doing great.
We're doing so great.
We're doing poppers. We're so good because it's Pride.
No, if poppers are half a vitamin water, no whiskey, no. Well, I don't even have a Sprite. What's even going on?
We're doing poppers. My poppers means Beniva.
I'm doing poppers of Mucinex. That's what I'm doing.
Brooke, I have a very exciting announcement to make.
What?
We have merch!
Yes, we do. And it's so good.
We have a small collection, at least to start. We have stickers, hats, shirts, hoodies, and a tote bag.
Yes. And a mug.
We have 3 main designs.
Yeah.
Evangelical and thriving.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about the Holy Bone? And of course, I Hate James Dobson.
Yeah.
We also have a Kevin mug, which was Brooke's one ask if we ever got merched, was to get a mug that just says Kevin on it. It is very cute. I'm actually very proud of it.
I'm so happy. Is Kevin excited about the Kevin mug?
He's very excited about it. I got his okay with the final design.
Yeah, good. And just know that your money is going directly to my Sprites.
Yes. Snack Fund is top of the list. And then hosting the website second.
Yeah.
But truly, snacks are number one here. So Thank you all for having such positive feedback about the idea of merch. It's been in the works for a while. And I'm excited to proudly proclaim my spite.
Me too. I cannot wait to wear my I Hate James Dobson hat and drink out of my Kevin mug. I'm not going to wear an ex-evangelical and thriving sweatshirt because I'm not an ex-evangelical, and I feel like that would be a lie.
Cultural appropriation.
That would be cultural appropriation. But I am going to wear just all the other merch, and I'm really excited about it.
We also have a website now.
Yes.
IHateJamesDobson.com. It is super basic, and I mostly made it so we could just link to the merch somewhere.
You know what? Sometimes being super basic is awesome.
Editing Jake here with a little more information about our merch. Firstly, we are using a website called Printful, which sells everything made to order. This means there's less waste and that things aren't going to sell out. Also, since we designed everything ourselves, we're able to keep the markups pretty low. I never want anything about this project to feel like a scam. My number one rule in all of this is to make things that I like. So really, I made merch for me, although I hope that you enjoyed as well, of course. You can find our merch at ihatejamesdobson.printful.me. That is printful.me. Again, that's ihatejamesdobson.printful.me. Or just go to our website, ihatejamesdobson.com. Thank you so much for all of your support, and go buy our merch. And now it is time for Brooke's Books.
Yay!
The part of the show where Brooke comes out and tells us about the books that she is reading.
Thanks, everybody, for liking this. That's so exciting. Okay, listen. When I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong.
Okay.
And I was wrong. The spider book is so good.
Yeah?
I finished it.
You finished it?
Oh my God. I couldn't stop reading it. Well, partially because I was dying of the plague. And I was like a sad little in my bed convalescing bird this weekend. But it was so good. I did not think I would like that at all. And I loved it. And I'm going to read the next one.
Oh, I didn't realize it was a series.
Well, there's 3.
Okay.
I read Children of Time, and certainly they were. And now I'm going to read Children of Ruin.
Okay.
And then there's Children of Memory.
Wow.
And, it was so good. Those spiders... You know what? The spiders were building a civilization and the humans were tearing one apart. And just so much was going on.
Wow.
It was beautiful. I almost cried. It was so good. You all were right. The spiders were so good. It was so beautiful. I don't even know why. At one point I was like, what is this even about? I don't even know. It was just beautiful. I loved it.
That's amazing.
It was incredible. Maybe I'm into sci-fi now. I don't know. Maybe I'm into spiders. I definitely bought spider gummy candy and spider rings for my friends in the book club because that's how I roll.
Have they acquired this merch?
I bought it. The book club is this weekend while we're camping in the woods with real spiders.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Very thematic.
I do like a theme. So there's that. I do want you to know that while I hand out these spider rings and we're in the woods talking about spiders, if I see a real spider, I will smash it dead. I'm sorry. That's just the way that's just my truth. Spider book, fantastic. Everybody go read it. I kind of want to tell you the ending, but I won't because it was so great. I'm still reading Middlemarch.
Fully in June.
Oh my God. It's really just about a town called Middlemarch.
Okay.
It's really, that's just what it is. There are a lot of pages. I thought maybe it would turn into being about something else, but that's
Is there like a plot or is it like...
Nope.
Okay.
It's really just about a town called Middlemarch. Turns out space spiders were more interesting.
To be fair, space spiders that is a hook. I'm invested in this.
Smut lovers, romantasy lovers. I started Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout. I'm 1 chapter in. I have no idea what's going on, but yes to all of it. I don't know. My friends who I'm reading it with are on book 4 somehow, even though we agreed to start last week.
Wow.
They took off and I didn't, but fine. And I asked ChatGPT some questions about my existential fears of death, and it recommended I read a book called The Book of Delights by Ross Gay.
Okay.
To cheer up.
Well, hey, it's Pride, baby. Ross Gay.
And I was like, okay.
Okay.
I guess that's better than Camus. So I bought it, and it's basically like, hey, here's a little story about a time I felt good. And I was like, okay, ChatGPT, thanks.
So you started reading it?
I read 1 or 2, and I was like, these are nice.
Okay.
I think ChatGPT might have been a little worried. So that's what I'm reading now. Thank you. That's been Brooke's Books.
Brooke's Books.
Brooke's Books.
Join us next time for when Brooke reads.
When Brooke continues to read Middlemarch in July.
And now to our featured presentation. It's Pride Month, baby!
Woo!
Back in 1969, in the aftermath of the Stonewall Riots, 2 trans women, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, spearheaded the modern queer rights movement, and the world has never been the same. We have talked at length about how Dobson hates queer people. We are like his #1 target. He has spent his entire career using every available opportunity to talk shit about us, promote abusive tactics like conversion therapy, utilize political power to deny us equal rights, and yet we are here. I have told my story in this podcast at various times. Although I very much grew up in the shadow of James Dobson, I never met the fucker. His impact was felt for sure, but I also had people like Pastor Saul or my rotating cast of youth pastors influencing me. Today, I want to focus on the stories of queer people who did know James Dobson directly. Our Pride extravaganza is the clash of the acronyms. It is titled LGBTQFOTF. We have a couple different sources, and we'll get to them as we go along, but there's 2 main people that I want to focus on in this. The first is a gentleman named Dr. Mike Rosebush. Dr. Mike Rosebush was born in 1953 to an Air Force family. He grew up very traditionally masculine, with hints of being gay scattered throughout, but not consciously aware of it. He has a blog that I'll plug at the end of this. I pulled a lot of these quotes from that. Quote, "What little I heard about gays when I was growing up was very limited to pejorative terms, such as perverts, queers, fags, none of which described my nature. In contrast, I was an all-league football player who went to an all-male Air Force academy, whose motto was, 'Bring me men,' which If that's not gay enough for you, I don't know. That alma mater was the second hardest university in America in which to get admitted. The academy was uber masculine, built to weed out the bad apples. Up to the challenge, I became one of the highest cadet commanders, graduating the top 10 of my class of 750 in leadership competency. I ate up the pressure and sought to be the very best, the man among men. Never once did I conceive of myself as a homosexual. He converted to being an evangelical at 21. He was a Catholic beforehand, thanks to the influence of an evangelical roommate. And when he was 22, he married a woman who did not grapple with him being gay. From what he has said, it feels like he was like a 5 or so on the Kinsey scale. He's very firm in being gay, but he also said things like, quote, I did not need counseling to automatically be aroused to my wife or maintain an erection throughout the culminating orgasm. All of the vaginal intercourse with my wife was personally satisfying, but not ravenously sought by me. Sure. Mm-hmm. Something about the way that it's written, like, doesn't sit super great with me, but I think that's just a personality thing. No bad blood to Dr. Rosebush. Also, the Kinsey scale is a bad heuristic, but I think it conveys what I'm trying to say here. It's a spectrum. Sexuality is a spectrum. And by age 30, he had 2 kids with his wife, and he became a professional counselor at the Air Force Academy. One of the cadets he was counseling was gay, and the conversations with that client prompted Mike to realize he was also gay. Quote, through 48 hours, I went through an identity crisis, repeatedly looping the words in my head, so I'm a homosexual. Confused, frightened, sad, I knew I needed to inform the only person who I could trust with such sensitive information, my wife. His wife, understandably, shocked and hurt, demanded that he go to conversion therapy. Quote, alas, 2 years of conversion therapy from a psychiatrist resulted in me feeling less weird, but just as gay as always. Nothing about my same-sex attraction diminished, but what did decrease was my hope in being able to change. I seriously pondered suicide. Unsurprisingly, conversion therapy didn't work, because, spoiler alert, it doesn't work.
Right.
Still, him and his wife remained married for 33 more years.
Oh my God.
Right. Mike has a lot of posts about being in a mixed orientation marriage. It's a little outside of our scope today, but there's some like really nuanced stuff that he says in there. We've talked a little bit about mixed orientation marriages before. They're not inherently bad or problematic, but they are difficult or can be difficult. They can be successful for whatever that means for you. After 20 years of service in the Air Force, Mike retired into civilian life. His next job? Vice President at Focus on the Family.
Oh.
Vice President. Quote, Dr. Dobson was my boss, a man whom I highly revered before joining Focus. And if you are one of the few people unfamiliar with Focus on the Family during the years of 1995 to 2004, which was the years that he was working there, I believe, please know it was the most powerful evangelical force in America. No Republican nominee for president of the United States could get elected without first earning Dr. Dobson's endorsement. The timeline is a little fuzzy from what I could piece together, but I believe that he served at Focus on the Family for a little bit more than 10 years. And then in 2004, he told the president of Focus, which I think means Dobson, that he was gay. He doesn't talk about this experience in any depth from what I could find, but he does say that he, quote, resigned amicably from Focus on the Family. So he wasn't outed necessarily. After that, he went back to counseling, specifically focused on gay Christian men. Quote, because of my evangelical track record as Focus's vice president, that company referred all of their homosexual clients to me. Soon after that, Exodus International learned of me, and they too started referring many of their ex-gay clients to me for counseling. Even Dr. Joseph Nicolosi's Narth organization referred homosexual men to me. Pause. We've mentioned all these names before.
Right.
Do you remember Exodus International or Joseph Nicolosi?
I remember Joseph Nicolosi.
What do you remember about him?
The name Nicolosi.
Perfect. Exodus International was the leading quote-unquote ministry for conversion therapy. In this role, Mike was actually involved with them. He was the director for professional counselors for Exodus International. Quote, my role as director was to ensure every professional counselor was licensed and Christian. I allowed complete autonomy for how each counselor conducted their trade. To my knowledge, I may have been the only Exodus counselor who did not provide conversion therapy. Dr. Joseph Nicolosi is the modern founder of conversion therapy. He called his flavor, his twist on it was called reparative therapy, because they believe that gay men were gay because they had some like rupture with their dad in the past. You got to repair that, which is just conversion therapy by a different name. Narth was the main quote-unquote academic body trying to justify this torture of gay people. NARTH stands for the National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality. So this closeted gay Christian counselor got so many referrals from conversion therapy advocates, which is wild. I also have like mixed feelings about his complicity in these systems. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's critical of them, and he like was in the system to subvert it. And we'll talk a little bit more about his story. So it's not like he's just the bad guy, but also like you are complicit in these systems,
right?
For a while. And so I personally, I don't really know what to make of all of that. Mm-hmm. We'll put a pin in that. Again, from what he said and what I can piece together, he didn't practice conversion therapy on his clients. Quote, when I first started my counseling career, I assumed all gay men wanted to become straight. After all, that had been my goal. However, because of my inability to lose my same-sex attraction, I became convinced that sexual orientation change was impossible. I would ask quote-unquote ex-gays if they'd extinguished their same-sex attraction. Literally, no one could tell me, yes, it's all gone. So I steered my counseling focus away from becoming straight and centered it on shame reduction. I'd come to believe, by God's grace, that my gayness was not a disorder. In fact, I now view it as a gift. Which, stylistically, yeah. We've talked about this before, too. If we have a client who's coming in about trying to, like, understand the intersection of faith and sexuality, our goal is not to say, here's what the theology is, but more so shame reduction.
Right.
That's just who you are, and let's figure out a way to live with that. Mm-hmm. He referred to his counseling style as sanctification coaching, standing in contrast to the euphemistic reparative therapy. Conversion therapy. This is how he describes his methods. 1, determine life goals as gay Christians. 2, reduce any sabotaging behaviors. And 3, obliterate all shame regarding ongoing existence of his pervasive same-sex attractions. That was kind of his go-to treatment plan for people. And that feels like a pretty reasonable treatment plan to me. Mm-hmm. What are your goals? What do you imagine life looking like? What are you doing that's actually hurting you? And how can you live more in harmony with all parts of yourself? Seems pretty unobjectionable to me.
Right.
In 2008, due to his success as a counselor and having a lot of like pretty good client outcomes, NARTH invited Mike to speak at their conference. And this is a little bit of a longer quote about his experience there, because I think it's really interesting. This is how he started the presentation. Quote, gentlemen, and of course it is men, that's my editorializing. Mm-hmm. Thank you for wanting to learn about my specific, unique form of counseling for Christian men with homosexuality. In the first 5 minutes of this talk, I want to set the stage for why my coaching differs from reparative therapy. Once you are armed with that knowledge, I will spend 25 minutes discussing how I conduct my coaching, and I'll reserve the final 20 minutes for question and answers. There are 3 primary differences between reparative therapy and sanctification coaching, so let's begin. First, we do not truly know what causes homosexuality. The statement above produced an audible gasp among the NARTH professional counselors in the room. All were certain that homosexuality in the male is due to insufficient emotional bonding between the homosexual boy and his father. Such belief in causation was presumed to be a given in the world of Focus on the Family, Exodus International, and NARTH. And then I made the following statement, quote, second, no one ever changes from being a homosexual into being a heterosexual. I have privately talked with thousands of homosexual Christian men, including, of course, my own clients. Not a single man has extinguished his same-sex attraction. However, to be fair and balanced, research indicates that a minor percentage of clients in conversion therapy acquired a heteroerotic capability where none had previously existed. Often this new attraction only happens to one woman. Sometimes that woman is or becomes the homosexual man's wife, in which case the two may enjoy vaginal intercourse. This time, the audience of NARTH professional counselors did not gasp when I made the above statements. Rather, they seethed. And continued, quote, third and finally, the typical client receiving reparative therapy undergoes weekly counseling from anywhere between 2 and 7 years. A trained reparative therapist, who is also a licensed psychiatrist, receives top dollar in fees. In today's economy, the fee would be approximately $400 an hour. Gentlemen, that is malpractice. Rage emitted from all of the faces of every NARTH-certified therapist in the room. And that was just the first 5 minutes of my presentation. So again, this is like adds more complexity to it. When he was given a platform to speak, he used that platform to speak to say, the way that you're doing this is bad and wrong.
Right.
Personally, I feel he didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
And that second bit around like conversion therapy works to create some heteroerotic capability also feels complicated and difficult, and I don't know that I totally agree with it.
Right.
it's a messy story. I appreciate it for the messiness, but I think it paints this picture of a person who really is like at these intersections of all these different parts of identity, not only gay and Christian, but counselor and also positions of power and military as part of this, like being such a respectable stand-up person in the community. Mm-hmm. How was this presentation sitting with you? Like his speech going through these different points?
I mean, it's cautious, right?
Cautious?
Yeah, it's like, I agree with you. Like he's not saying everything he could be saying, right? But he's also in this room full of people who would probably tear him off the stage if he did. Yeah. Right? The thing he's saying about attraction to one woman is misleading, right? Mm-hmm. Because we know that's really their goal, is like, okay, then get a wife and that's all you need. Right. Right? I think that's, like you said, it's messy. It's way more complicated than that.
Yeah. And also, like, the labels of gay and straight are fake and made up. Right. And I fully believe that there are gay men who can find sexual enjoyment with specific women, and that doesn't mean they're not gay. But also, like, the North folks, the way that they would take that statement is very different from what I mean from it. It's complicated. That was a weekend conference. The following Monday, Mike Rosebush was fired from Exodus International, removed from Focus on the Family's referral list, and removed from the North referral list. So his entire professional career kind of exploded because of this presentation. After being fired from these organizations, Mike went back to the Air Force Academy. However, he was now publicly associated with North and Exodus International and Focus on the Family, and so a lot of people said he was a conversion therapy advocate. But also, the evangelical Christians said he was essentially a traitor. He didn't really fit into either space. Quote, "I've experienced 2 executions in my life. The first, by Focus, Exodus, and North, was because I was too gay, too anti-Christian. The second execution, by the media smear campaign, was because I was too anti-gay, too Christian." Mike's wife passed away of cancer in 2017. They were married the whole time. The marriage was complicated, as you may imagine. His wife was a devout evangelical her whole life, and the relationship was full of joy and also big fights. Quote, "After 41 years of marriage, I held my wife's hand as she passed. She was my best friend and my worst enemy. She courageously upheld her evangelical perspectives regarding both homosexuality and divorce. In many ways, she was my hero." Those contradictions in that statement, I think, again, I have so many thoughts, so many contradictory thoughts about this person and this story. And I think there's an honesty to it that we don't see from Dobson at all. Yeah. After her passing, Mike lived openly as a single gay man. He briefly lived as a celibate gay man, the compromise option for a lot of gay evangelicals, before revising his theology. Books like Torn by Justin Lee, Gregory Cole's Single Gay Christian, and David Gushie's After Evangelicalism really influenced his thinking here. Mike has a number of posts on his Medium page about the theology justifying gay marriage. This is a thing that a lot of gay Christians really get into. How can we understand these verses in the Bible that, in our current translations, pretty seemingly reject homosexuality? How can I be gay and also believe the Bible to be true? In 2022, Mike got remarried to a man named Reggie. Quote, "I'm not only married to Reggie, but I have 2 married adult kids and 8 grandkids. I also serve as a Yoda, a seasoned mentor for younger gay Christian men. I come alongside such beautiful people as their friend, extending kindness and dignity to each man. Additionally, I write a lot about what it's like to be a gay Christian." I found Dr. Mike Rosebush on his Medium page called Gayoda. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's gay and Yoda together without a space in between. He writes often about the intersections of being gay and a Christian. Some posts are pretty straightforward, like 10 signs you obviously don't know any gay Christians, and some are more about his life story. Mike is an ex-evangelical, but is still joyfully a Christian, and I love that for him. Mm-hmm. That's the first subject of our episode today.
What do you think about this?
Well, I have a lot of complicated feelings. I think I would love to sit down and talk with him, and spoiler alert, I am. I don't know that it will be for the podcast. I might have to cut this part. But, like, I reached out to him on the Medium.
Tricky trick.
And so, like, I do want to talk with him. I want to hear more about his story. I don't wholly agree with everything that he says. And I don't think he would, like, need me to. I also have a lot of respect for, like, being born in the 50s and grappling with your identity as a queer person in that time.
Sure.
I think very clearly he cares about the people around him and wants to do right by the people around him and the communities. He's, especially as he's gotten older, like had a more nuanced understanding of social justice. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about this at the end. I think a lot about like coalition building. And although I don't know that I like 100% agree with everything he says, and I don't know that we'd necessarily be best friends, he's a person that I think I could work alongside with pretty well, even with all of these complicated thoughts and feelings. What do you think?
Tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes, right? Different time, right? He was coming up in a different time than we were, and evangelical, married, kids, all of that, a different time, and involved with James Dobson and Focus on the Family, and that was his career.
Yeah.
Right, and you have to think about what he was doing, right? Like, and to be honest, like the thought of him kind of counseling all these men in the way that he was probably was a huge service. Almost
definitely saved some lives.
Yeah, right? I'm sort of surprised that they didn't realize that was happening. Right? That they were sending him all these men and weren't like aware that that's the type of counseling he was doing until he got up on a stage and talked about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that seems, whatever. I would love to hear what he has to say to you about his work with Focus on the Family and with James Dobson.
I think that's one of my main takeaways is I understand kind of his life story. He's laid it out in a couple of different ways. I really don't know what his life was like when he was at Focus on the Family. And like he had come to terms with being gay before joining them. What is that like for him to...
Yeah, I'm a little curious, like what held him in?
Yeah.
Right? What held him into Focus on the Family? What held him into evangelicalism? And what held him into his marriage when he had this information?
I can speak to that last part. He talks at great length about how, for him, he very much was an evangelical first and foremost, and divorce was just not an option for him. He made a commitment to his wife and to God to be with this person until death, and he was going to fulfill that obligation. That was a promise that he made that he took very seriously. I have complicated feelings about that, but I think that's also like wanting to do right by this person. So that was our first subject.
Yeah.
The second person I want to talk about for this episode is a lovely woman named Amber Cantoran-Wylde. She's a fairly successful ex-evangelical speaker. She's written 3 books, 2 of which are biographies I have read for this episode.
Here they come.
First, Refocusing My Family, Coming Out, Being Cast Out, and Discovering the True Love of God. This one was given to me by my therapist.
Oh.
And it's signed.
Oh my gosh.
The second, Out of Focus, My Story of Sexuality, Shame, and Toxic Evangelicalism. The other book that she has written is called Unashamed. It is a coming out guide for, quote, LGBTQ people of faith.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, I have not read it. I did not read it for this. I've read a lot of other stuff for this, but I'd be very interested. My therapist sent me a copy of her first book. I bought the second one personally. Refocusing My Family feels like a first draft of Out of Focus. They both tell Amber's story and hit many of the same beats, but Out of Focus feels like it was written by someone further along in their deconstruction from evangelicalism. Because it is. For instance, this is included in Out of Focus, not in Refocusing My Family. Quote, now, being a divorced gay female with an invisible disability, being immersed in a variety of cultures, perspectives, experiences, and faith is critically important to me. Some of my best friends are queer, transgender, non-binary, polyamorous, people of color, people of different faiths, or no faith at all, neurodivergent, chronically ill, and disabled. I love hanging out with the marginalized, not only because I myself am marginalized, but because that's where authenticity, intersectionality, and richness lie. That's pretty, for lack of a better term, that's pretty woke.
Yeah.
And that is not something that I think a person fresh into their deconstruction would really be able to sit with and appreciate. Out of Focus also has a lot more research into it compared to Refocusing My Family, especially about how evangelicalism is tied with white nationalism. There's a section about our good friend, Paul Popenoe.
Popenoe.
Dobson's mentor, who we talked about in our very first 2 episodes. What do you remember about Poppy?
Oh boy, don't ask me these questions. Those first episodes are. I've repressed most of that information.
That's fair. Also, I've repressed the audio quality of those episodes in my mind.
Just skip ahead to like episode 7.
Skip ahead to our purity culture series.
Yeah.
This is how Amber writes it. Quote, Dobson was the protege of Paul Popenoe, an atheist eugenicist. Paul Popenoe, who founded the American Institute of Family Relations in 1930, advocated for the forced sterilization of weaklings, people with mental illness, in order to improve the race by preventing the unfit from being born. But preventing the procreation of the unfit was only part of the eugenicists' plan. They also had to increase the production of the fit, white middle-class families. By the middle of the 1930s, the Great Depression was at its height, and both marriage and birth rates were in significant decline. So in order to prevent race suicide, Popenoe shifted his focus from sterilization to marriage and family therapy. Although Popenoe was not religious, evangelicals became his professional allies in a quest to promote patriarchal and complementarian family values. Popenoe focused on working with religious leaders in pastoral psychology. Enter James Dobson. She also quotes Jesus and John Wayne, one of the books that I read when I was preparing for the start of this podcast. Quote, outbreeding opponents was a first step in outvoting them, and in their reproductive capacities, women served as domestic warriors. If you want to read either book, I recommend Out of Focus. Reading them back to back, though, is an interesting case study in deconstruction. So, why Amber? Why Amber Cantoran-Wylde? Firstly, she wrote books, and I could read those, and I'm going to talk about things that I can read. Second, we must take a detour to talk about Focus on the Family's radio dramas. James Dobson built an empire on the radio. While his books are his tangible written record of his ideas, he's actually more well known for his radio show, Family Talk. As FOTF grew, they leaned into the medium of radio. Focus on the Family produces Adventures in Odyssey, a radio Christian drama for kids, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. They also produced shows like a dramatization of the Chronicles of Narnia, and what we would call a miniseries called Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This is the story of Corrie ten Boom's story, The Hiding Place. Very, very brief overview. Corrie ten Boom was a person whose family hid Jews in the Netherlands during World War II. Her and her family were captured and sent to concentration camps, where she and her sister shared a hidden Bible to tell other prisoners about Jesus. It's a true story. She's a pretty cool person. And the Focus on the Family adaptation won a Peabody. Like, it is like recognized thing. Their radio drama series are like both really good in quality and also really well known. The executive producer for all of these radio dramas is a man named Dave Arnold. Dave Arnold is Amber's father. Oh, this is my writing. When you grow up with a parent in the executive branch of Focus on the Family, your whole family becomes a focus family. And that's a phrase that she uses throughout this book, being a focus family. Mm-hmm. We've talked about whether or not evangelicalism is a cult, and the answer is like, kind of. But there's a much stronger argument for those within Dobson's direct sphere of influence. Quote, my parents worked hard to incorporate values that James Dobson and Focus on the Family deemed important, which really came down to two foundational commands. Love God with all your heart, and foster a godly family. Family was the ultimate gift and should reflect Christ in all aspects. Principles like the sanctity of marriage, the belief that every life is valuable, and the fact that children should be raised with morals grounded in biblical principles all pointed back to a loving God. That is how you focused on your family. Amber, in her childhood, hit all of the marks of evangelicalism, a full bingo, if you will. Awana? Check. Homeschooled? Check. Having a small family band and performing for others to evangelize to them? Check.
Oh, no.
Having a fucked up purity culture ceremony at 13 where she received a purity ring from her dad and a hope chest? Quote, the gift undoubtedly pointed to my wedding day and my future family. Already stocked with cookbooks and crochet doilies. I was to continue collecting my future dreams and storing them inside for when I settled down and got married. Check.
No, Amber.
Here's a little bit more about that ceremony. Quote, to celebrate the momentous occasion, turning 13, grandparents, aunts, and cousins from out of state came to be part of my special day. Family and friends all gathered together for this coming of age ceremony and pledge of commitment. Goes on to talk about signing a purity pledge. My dad then opened a velvet box that contained my purity ring. It was sterling silver with a cross, a heart, and a key, signifying that Christ held the key to my heart until the day came for me to be married. Her dad makes a speech about this, and then he placed the ring on my wedding finger, wrapped his arms around me in a long embrace. Gathering everyone around me to pray over me and seal the commitment I had just made, I felt the responsibility before me like a weight on my shoulders.
Please don't take me back to the purity call episodes. I can't.
This is about as deep as we go into purity culture, but the first-hand account into purity culture, especially a girl, a woman, which has a whole different element of purity culture than I'm able to speak to personally, and someone at that level of enmeshment and focus on the family, I think is so interesting in a horrible kind of way.
Yeah, it is.
So not only did Amber listen to Adventures in Odyssey every day as part of her homeschooling curriculum, she was in it.
Oh.
Mostly as background voices, granted, like the character Brooke Myers, and was in episodes like number 348 with a little help from my friends. You know the episode. We all know that episode.
Yeah, you know.
On the Adventures in Odyssey Wikipedia, there's a specific wiki for Adventures in Odyssey. There is no information about her. It seems like they tried to delete all the information about her for reasons that I imagine you can guess and we'll probably get into. But like she's still credited in the voice, so she has her own page. It's very like start and stop. I love a bunch of like broken links. It's really interesting. Amber also had many of the classic signs of that special flavor of evangelical or religious trauma, like that purity culture bullshit, or that emotions are bad. Quote, since my parents' disagreements always took place behind closed doors, I never got to see my parents model healthy disagreement and resolution. As a result, I grew up believing that normal life meant a happy life without conflict. Or, quote, as I grew, I noticed even more that strong emotions, especially negative emotions, weren't welcome. We were taught to be happy, blessed, and respectful. There was little tolerance for laziness, the early bird gets the worm, messiness, cleanliness is next to godliness, or grumpiness, God never gives you more than you can handle. We were taught that everything happens for a reason, that having enough faith and praying more were the answers to all of life's problems. And in all of this religious trauma, there's also an important and also somewhat common break, performing. Quote, I found comfort in the ways the lyrics and piano keys connected me to a form of expression. Since my emotions were something I struggled to express honestly, pouring that honesty into my music let me strength. I didn't have to find the words to describe how I was feeling. Instead, I could show it through the sounds my fingers created. More about the common religious trauma, a lot of internalized misogyny. Amber's mom often told her to be a blessing to others, which in some ways just meant being on your best behavior, but also had that religious trauma bent to it, especially as a woman meant putting herself last. Yep.
This is something I undo with a lot of my female clients. Right? I always talk about like letting yourself sit in the front seat once in a while. Right? And this idea of, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but this idea for people who grew up in religious backgrounds and people who didn't, women who didn't, but this idea of like selflessness, right? Absence of self.
Absolutely.
And it's really hard for people to undo that.
It is. I was talking with some of the therapists that I helped train today, and one of them mentioned that by definition, this job is supremely unfair. It also does not surprise me that it is a field primarily dominated by women. And I think the intersection of those things is pretty obvious. We also, as a society, really don't give helping professions the credit that they're due. Teachers, I think, famously are so underpaid. But you take that to the nth degree when it comes to this kind of like religious trauma. And unfortunately, other common types of religious trauma, including significant mental health issues, including trichotillomania, which is hair pulling, non-suicidal self-injury, suicidal ideation, and more. I don't want to get into too many of the details here. It feels like it's not my story to tell. Amber does talk about it honestly in the book, and she does something that I think is cool, which includes a little trigger warning every time that it happens, the little asterisk before the paragraph starts, so you can prepare yourself or skip over it if you don't want to. I've never seen that done stylistically. I think it's really, really smart.
That's cool.
When she was understandably a pretty depressed teenager, her parents sent her to a Christian counselor, which didn't work. Quote, when those efforts failed, my parents resorted to taking me to see one of our church pastors who specialized in deliverance ministry. These meetings took place off-site during the week in the pastor's private office. Arriving with both my parents one afternoon, a tall, husky man and his wife prepared me for exorcism. They laid their hands on me, begging God to come, and began calling out of my demons depression, anxiety, and hair pulling. I felt extremely uncomfortable, not to mention terrified. Lift your hands upward, Amber. Believe in the power of Jesus, Amber. Proclaim that you want to be free, Amber. Denounce the power these demons have over your life, Amber. I did want to be free, but the idea that there were demons living inside me was mortifying to me, and this method of attaining freedom was traumatizing. Now's the time of story where Jake comes out about a little rant about Christian counselors. I'm not talking about licensed therapists who happen to be Christian. I'm talking about people who get a nifty little email saying, "You're a Christian counselor," without any formal licenses or regulatory bodies. I've talked with them before, but I've thought a lot about it since we spoke about them last. I think this is the best way to sum up my thoughts. These are people who are marketing mental health and practicing theology. Inadvertently or not, preying on people's lack of knowledge of these fields to understand the limitations of the help that they're trained to provide. That is why I have such an issue with quote-unquote Christian counselors. Mm-hmm. Back to Amber's story, so much internalized homophobia. There are a lot of examples of messages said directly to Amber, and I don't think it would actually be helpful for us to go through each and every one of them. But Amber does cite one clip that I think is worth listening to. Mm-hmm. And now, I'm going to play this thing.
Yay!
A brief introduction to this clip. It's an interview between Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, and James Dobson. It takes place in 2016. But first, we're going to expand our lore a little bit. There's a special guest introducing this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Family Talk with our host, psychologist and best-selling author, Dr. James Dobson. At a recent Family Talk event, Franklin Graham had a Q&A session with my dad to talk about some of the issues important to believers in today's culture. As many of you know, Franklin Graham is the president and CEO of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and Samaritan's Purse, the International Christian Relief and Evangelism Organization. He has also advised 5 U.S. presidents, as well as world leaders from Europe, Africa, Asia, and Latin America.
Baby Dobson!
Hey, Ryan Dobson. How are you?
Dobby Jr.
He is, or at least was very involved with Focus on the Family stuff. He was his co-host on Family Talk for a while.
Interview with my dad.
Reverend Graham, thank you so much for those words and that encouragement. Tell us what you're going to say when you're standing on the steps of these Capitol buildings.
I think, Dr. Dobson, again, I want to start with confessing our sins as a nation. And we have allowed the enemy to come into our churches. I was talking to some Christians, and they were talking about how they have invited these gay children to come into their home and to come to the church, and that they were wanting to influence them. And I thought to myself, they're not going to influence those kids. Those kids are going to influence this parent's children. And what happens is we think that we can fight by smiling and being real nice and loving. We have to understand who the enemy is and what he wants to devour our homes. He wants to devour this nation. And we have to be so careful who we let our kids hang out with. We have to be so careful who we let into the churches. And you have immoral people that get into churches, and it begins to affect the others in the church. And it is dangerous.
You know, it's a whole lot broader than just the gay agenda.
Oh, I know.
LGBT. The people understand when they're saying, well, you know, if people who have this inclination want to fall in love and want to express this in the form of marriage and so on. LGBT. You know what the B stands for? Bisexual. That's orgies.
I had to play that clip for you, that last part.
Bisexual. That's orgies. In his creepy little Jan Crouch voice. How have you never played that for me before? Wait, we just made all that merch and we didn't put that on the merch?
We can make merch about it.
Wait a minute. I'm never going to recover from this. You know what the B stands for? Orgies. That is fucking hilarious. The way that people think bisexuals are sex fiends, you know what we're doing? drinking too many drinks, watching too many shows,
reading books about space spiders,
sitting in our chairs weird. Oh, God.
I wasn't aware that clip existed until Amber wrote about it in her book. And the first part's horrible, like saying the enemy is basically gay kids. Devastating, horrible, evil. But I had to include the part about bisexual means orgies. God. You know, all the orgies that you're having right now.
Yeah, and also, you know what?
Your studio apartment's just a sex pit.
It's just a sex pit. But you know what else? Go get it. Who cares?
Yeah. True.
Like, oh my God. And now I'm going to need one piece of merch that says the B stands for orgy. I'm never going to. Can you at some point make a game for me that is playing clips and I have to determine if it's James Dobson or Jan Crouch?
I think I can do that. That's very good.
That would be so much fun for me, and I really want you to.
That's incredible. I love that idea.
Can you? I know we'll cut it out, and no. I know we'd want to have time and stuff and go home and we're both sick, but can you just play it one more time? Just that part.
LGBT. You know what the B stands for? Bisexual. That's orgies.
You know what the B stands for? Bisexual. That's orgies. I'll never recover from that. Lots of sex with lots of people. Guess what, James Dobson? Incorrect. Oh my God. That is so funny.
I'm just thinking about all the the women I know who are married to men and 10 years into their marriage, they realize they're bisexual. And that's all they need to do is just realize. And that's super valid. That's not me critiquing them. But I think they'd be shocked to hear this.
Also, just the way that is the trope that we're always fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where it's oh, that person doesn't want to fall in love or have a relationship or need care or anything. They just want to have orgies all the time. It's what?
They'll fuck whoever they can.
Yeah, incorrect.
Yeah, you don't have standards as bisexual.
No. That's such a gift. What, really quickly, when you first heard that, were you so excited to play that for me?
So, yes. I didn't hear it first. Amber quoted it in her book, and I said, I have to find this clip. I have to find this clip to play it for you.
I love that so much. I can't even handle it.
As she got older, Amber slowly came into knowing herself more. She had a messy first love with another closeted girl, which is always a recipe for success. Also, I have been there too in the gay version of that. And she was outed. After finding people like her, gay Christians especially, and a good amount of therapy, she was able to come out to her family in 2012. Unfortunately, it did not go well. Quote, I feel like you've died, Amber, like I've lost you. You've turned your back on God and everything we've ever taught you. It's extremely selfish of you to do something that makes you happy without thinking about how this would affect the family. If I want to go and marry a donkey, is that okay? Or if I see a little kid and want to have sex with him, can I just go ahead and do that and act on however I feel? You could even get a bunch of murderers together and form their own church and make it okay. It's very embarrassing. You've made a choice that completely contradicts everything your mom and I taught you and know to be true. It stands opposite of my life's work and the tenets of my employer. And so on. There's a lot of quotes like that. I do find the fact that they are a focused family is so omnipresent and such a factor, even in such an intimate moment like this.
Mm-hmm.
Amber slowly put boundaries with her family as they also pulled away. They refused to be at her wedding, and as far as I know, they're basically cut off at present.
Mm.
Quote, knowing what I know now, I wish I'd written a letter to them in order to shield myself from their initial reaction. One thing I've learned over the last 5 years is that protecting myself is more important than protecting them. A child shouldn't have to shield their own parents from the truth. For far too long, I had protected them to the cost and detriment of my own safety and mental health. But in the end, it really didn't make a difference or change anything. It wasn't until I finally learned to set boundaries for the sake of my own safety and sanity that I actually started finding some healing from all the hurt. But we are resilient. Amber continued to live and thrive, getting married and divorced, finding a church and a community that loves and supports her. She is still spiritual, although she describes herself as follows, quote, I still work with churches and at the intersection of faith and sexuality a great deal. My own journey of religious trauma has slowly brought me to find spirituality outside the structure of organized religion. and she uses her story to push for change. Quote, in early 2016, I sat across the dinner table from the national trans advocate and former megachurch pastor, Reverend Dr. Paula Williams. I told her I was thinking of going public with my story and asked if she had any advice for me. She looked me in the eyes with an intensity that came both from a heart of love and a heart of compassion and said, Amber, embedded in your identity is a responsibility to be a voice for change. I share my story with you because I believe more voices are needed to change the narratives for LGBTQ Christians. As comfortable and easy as it is to live inside a box, sometimes our families, our beliefs, our worldviews need to be refocused. Sometimes what we believed is wrong. Sometimes the way we understand the world is misinformed. In Out of Focus, which came out 6 years after Refocusing My Family, Amber talks more about being diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease and living with a disability and chronic pain, navigating a divorce, and generally more about her deconstruction journey. Quote, love takes courage. It takes bravery. It takes grit, especially as queer people, to say, I'm in this relationship with you, and I'm willing to take the risk of giving this a try. I took the risk of believing in love based on what I felt, knew, and believed to be true. That's all any of us can really do. I want to do two things with this episode. One, I wanted to look at how queer people who knew James Dobson were impacted by this show's namesake. With so many people impacted by his work, to hear those who dealt with him directly adds a new layer, and I think hopefully some clarity. I was struck by a few themes when reading both of these stories. Brooke, what is standing out to you as we're thinking about Dr. Mike Rosebush and Amber Cantorna-Wylde?
I just think this is a really interesting perspective that you've chosen for this episode, right? This idea of people who actually, queer people who actually knew or worked or grew up around Focus on the Family or James Dobson directly, you know, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about as we talk about this, right?
Yeah.
The impact of that, not just growing up in evangelicalism or with the ideals of James Dobson, but the actual person himself.
Absolutely. To that note, one of the things that really stood out to me is how all-consuming being a part of Focus on the Family is. You are a focused family. Again, that's a phrase that they use a number of times. You are constantly under observation, and you really internalize that critical voice. You aren't just an evangelical. It's an additional layer. It comes with a lot of responsibility, a public platform, as it were. Amber talks about this a lot growing up, that how everything that she did, she felt represented her dad, or her mom, who was also a leader in the community, her brother, who was a leader in their church, right? Everything she did was a reflection of all of them and their roles as well. Also, it stands out to me that you are kept in the dark about who you are. Not just about gay things, although yes, especially that. It's really notable to me that both people we talked about came out as adults, but also feelings, emotions. We've talked about this a lot, but especially with purity culture, when you learn that anything that goes against the Bible, according to Dobson, is bad, you have to cut off parts of you. I also find it interesting the roles that gender and age and agency play. Right? Dr. Rosebush was able to keep working in a similar field. He was able to speak at North after he left Focus on the Family. Even after he was excommunicated from all of that, he's able to have some kind of coaching, leadership counseling kind of vibe. I'm not saying that it was easy or that every guy has it easy. My story more closely relates to Amber's, all things being even. But he had a career and could build a life apart from Focus on the Family. Amber tried and succeeded at doing so, but it was much harder. Partly because she was younger, partly because her family was still deeply invested in Focus on the Family, and I'm sure partly because people, even non-evangelicals, just don't take women as seriously. The second thing I wanted to do with this episode is explore what it can be like to be a queer ex-evangelical and have some sense of spirituality. This isn't my path, so I can only speak to it as an outsider in some ways, but it's not a moral judgment on those who are still a Christian. There is no right way to be queer, and there's no right way to be an ex-evangelical. If it is important and meaningful to you, I hope you find peace, faith, hope, and love in it. I've tried to be very intentional that this is not an anti-Christian podcast. One thing that came up many times throughout all the reading I did was both authors justifying the intersection of these identities. Amber talked about authors like Matthew Vines. Both of them talked about Justin Lee, who wrote books tackling specific Bible verses that appear to be about being gay, called them clobber passages, clobber verses, because he used to clobber you with. Dr. Mike has multiple blog posts similarly talking about how God blesses gay marriages. I have no horse in this race, and frankly, I'm not particularly interested in people's justifications for why they believe what they do, especially when it comes to how you can be gay and a Christian. You can, God bless. I say that to say this. I think it is important to be critical and thoughtful of your beliefs. To live a consistent life grounded in your values and priorities is a great thing to do. To have some kind of internal logic that you are consistent with is important. And I know for me, and for others who I've talked to, the line between understanding your beliefs and only feeling validated when other people agree can be blurry if exists at all. For the James Dobsons and Dave Arnolds of the world, you will never be just one well-reasoned argument away from convincing them. You have to be able to find peace with your beliefs, regardless of what others say. If it's enough for you, it's enough. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to be wrong. You're allowed to have your own thoughts, opinions, and relationships, and they're allowed to change with time. Mike Rosebush, as far as I can tell, fully a Christian. In Refocusing My Family, Amber Cantoran-Wylde was very much a Christian. And now to Focus, the label doesn't fit as cleanly, even if she's still very connected to her sense of spirituality. When I came out, I felt like I had to amputate the religious part of myself. Or perhaps that it was amputated for me. In any case, I've gone from being a hard atheist to more of a soft one. I have no idea how things like consciousness work, and I'm very aware that I'm a monkey with anxiety and a rock hurling through space. I don't know much about the universe. None of us are right or wrong here. When we can learn to talk across and appreciate these differences, we can start building communities with each other, and we can start really supporting each other. As I mentioned, I've been thinking a lot about building coalitions recently. Why the right wing in America has been so fucking successful, and the left can't even get basic climate change wins or anything approaching universal healthcare. While these problems are multifaceted, including the fact that the right has so much more money, the solution has to involve working with, cooperating with, supporting, respecting, and even loving people from whom we are different and disagree. Us versus them is just evangelical morality dressed up in different clothes. Don't let them take your sense of spirituality, and don't let them take your belief in love. Readers, I hope you have a fabulous Pride Month, whether or not you're part of the queer community. I hope we can all be a little bit kinder to each other and just a little bit more gay. Live life authentically, loudly, and join the cacophonous chorus of us marching to the beat of our own drum. You are good. Except James Dobson. I hate James Dobson.
I hate James Dobson. And readers, never forget, B is for blogs. And Brooke. And bisexuals.
And
orgies.
Borgies. I Hate James Dobson is a labor of love, spite, written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. In this venture, I am honored to be joined by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it. And if you want to connect with us more, you can find us on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube at I Hate James Dobson, and somehow still on Twitter at IHateJDobs. You can also email us at IHateJamesDobson@gmail.com. We have merch available at IHateJamesDobson.printful.me or on our website, IHateJamesDobson.com. Our theme music is by Mood Maze and the song is called Trendsetter. Special thanks, as always, to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, Jack, and Gary. And thank you, readers, for enjoying our show.
LGBT. You know what the B stands for? Bisexual. That's orgies.